Eu fico ali, não é?
So again, good afternoon. On behalf of FLAD, Portuguese Luso-American Development Foundation, thank you all for being here. After the first session we had with Isabel Strout, it's now our pleasure to be here with Chimamanda Adichie once again for another session of Meet the Authors. Two special and simple notes. One to my fellow board member, Nuno Pinheiro Torres, who had the idea of trying this arrangement in the room, and I think it works. So it's a first, but it works. And mainly, thank you, Chimamanda, for being responsible for this. We never had such a buzz, so it's your. So, as you probably know, this year FLAD is celebrating 40 years of existence, and these sessions are a proof of our commitment to culture, our commitment with authors, Portuguese and American authors, and this in a place and in a work that, and I'd like to underline this, it's both for us a bridge between Portugal and the United States, a bridge that we want to promote and defend, and we want to promote and defend as always a space of liberty, of authors to be able, and us, to be able to speak freely, and it will be as a space of freedom that we want to keep these sessions and our work. Chimamanda will talk with Isabel Lucas. Isabel Lucas has been a partner in our sessions, so she has been presenting, and she will go on presenting the authors and keeping these moments as a moment of conversation of on one side, knowing better the authors, on the other side, giving you the space and the time to interact with them. I also have to take this opportunity to thank Don Quixote Leia, that means Ana Rita Bessa and Carmen Serrano. They have been essential in this, again, partnership with Leia. Don Quixote, as you know, has been the publishing house of Chimamanda Adichie in Portugal. I hope you enjoy, and without further words, you are not here to listen to me, so without further words, Isabel, the floor is yours. Chimamanda, if you can. Final note, just just to say, a final note, just to say that Chimamanda is with problems in her voice. So she had a couple of interviews before this moment where she tried not to be completely funny. And so to ask for your understanding, we are trying to find a solution with a microphone for Chimamanda to be able to speak with us, but let's have an understanding for this situation and keep silence, otherwise it will be impossible to listen to her. Thank you, Chimamanda.
Boa tarde, good afternoon, good evening, I don't know. Welcome to this whispering session. I don't know, we'll try to make this conversation alive, and I have to thank Chimamanda to be here with us. I'm going to present her very briefly. I know that you should know her a lot, but it's difficult to speak about contemporary literature, African, global, feminist, without invoking the voice of Chimamanda Adichie, born in Enugu, Nigeria, and educated between Nsukka, Philadelphia, and Yale. Adichie is the author of novels that have reshaped how we think about history, as Half of a Yellow Sun, race, and Americanah, and gender, when in Purple Hibiscus, Dear Ijawele, We Should All Be Feminists, and her voice is precise and politically alert. She writes with clarity of a storyteller and the conviction of a woman who has never been afraid to speak her mind. Now, with Dream Count, in Portuguese it's called Inventário de Sonhos, a latest and perhaps most introspective novel, Adichie returns to fiction after years of essays, lectures, and personal mourning. In this book, she gives voice for four women navigating motherhood, migration, desire, and memory in a world reshaped by a global pandemic. It is a novel of intimate reckonings, quiet in tone, yet radical in its honesty. From Lagos to Washington, from grief to rebirth, from friendship to the private costs of public lives, Dream Count asks us to look inward. And so today, we follow the same path with questions shaped by her words, her silences, and the work she has given us. Welcome, Chimamanda. My first question is a question that almost everybody makes. Why 10 years to write a novel?
No, I think... Hello, everyone. No, Isabel, I think that we need a minute for that wonderful introduction. I really love how you talked about this novel.
Thank you.
And I agree, I think it is my most introspective. And I just really love the idea that the tone is quiet, but it's not a quiet novel.
No.
And so thank you. I really appreciate that. Why did I wait 10 years? Because I wanted to know. Because it's funny when I'm asked that, it makes me think about somebody, not quite a relative, but someone I know well in Nigeria who said to me, but it's just a novel, why will it take you 10 years? Right? And for people who don't write fiction, I can see how they would think, well, why did it? It didn't really take 10 years, it's just that I had that horrible condition in which a writer wants to write but cannot write, and which people very carelessly call writer's block. It's such a strange expression, just that word block.
Block.
Just sounds so wrong, and there's something very scary about it, because I wouldn't use it when I was going through that experience because I'm superstitious, and so I felt, my God, if I say block, then something really will be blocked. But I couldn't write, and I couldn't write fiction. And it was a very just awful place to be. The worst thing I think about having writer's block is that you're helpless. because you don't know when it's going to end or if it will end. And I've always felt a kind of panic about my writing, about fiction, because I love fiction so much. I think in some ways it's when you're in a very unhealthy relationship and you keep worrying that he won't come back. Not that I've had that.
Of course.
And I feel that way about my fiction. And so even when I am writing, there's an undertone of panic. Because for me, I think the most unbearable thing that could happen in my life is if I no longer write fiction.
So you suffer with that a lot while you were writing this?
Every time when I write fiction, it's the same thing. But also, writing fiction gives me so much joy that I'm a bit reluctant to classify it as suffering. I like to think it's just because when my writing is going well, it makes me so happy. I'm so high just on the writing.
Yeah.
And it really just makes me feel, and I know, and often when I talk about this, I know it can be a bit iffy, but it really does feel spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do feel that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing on earth, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, of course, the other part, which is the panic. So there are times when I don't want to go to bed when I'm writing fiction because I worry that I'll wake up and it'll be gone.
And can you identify a moment in this process of writing this novel when you feel that high?
Oh,
that joy.
It's really. So the moments there. So the writing process is like that. So there are times. Thank you. He's brought me tea to save my throat. Thank you. So there are times when. Sorry, I'm just checking to see this. No, I asked for something herbal, and it doesn't look herbal to me. So I'm a bit suspicious. I don't know what these Portuguese are up to. But
Trust us.
Considering the Portuguese history in Africa.
Okay. It's here. We should talk about that also, but later.
But actually, it's interesting you asked that. I'm thinking about, okay, I do know. I remember there are parts of the book that were not easy to write.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel much of that sort of high joy. But there are times when I was writing, the kind of early stages of, certain parts of the early stages of Kadiatu, because I just felt suspended in my own imagination, and it was a very happy place to be, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And also I remember being really happy at the ending. The ending came to me, it felt like, again, at the risk of sounding strange, it felt like a revelation. It felt like it wasn't the first ending that I had in the first draft. And so when this ending came, it felt so right. And I just remember being both very happy, but also so deeply emotional that I wept.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't a sad cry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions that is in the center of the book, it's the book, we have 4 women here, but the central question, I guess, it's what does it mean to be human? I don't know if you agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are what did you try to try to answer, or to try to make this question more clear?
If I had to say, I would say 2 things. The longing for connection,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to dream. I think that for me to be human is that. And I think I really do feel that we all want some kind of meaning, but meaning through other people, that we want connection, we want love, we want to be seen, we want to be valued, and there's a sense in which I think we constantly seek that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for women in particular, I'm just fascinated by what that's seeking.
Seeking
Often,
for love?
yes, what it often
Mainly.
looks like, yes.
It's a question that we all seeking for love, it's old-fashioned, but these women are all seeking for love
Yes,
in many different ways.
Yes. I think all of us on earth are, even when we deny it. I think there's something interesting. Increasingly, I feel like I want to write an essay about how it's time for the old-fashioned again, or maybe it's time for us to be more honest about. I think that there's certain things that we dismiss in the name of sophistication, when in fact what we're doing is a kind of almost a kind of dishonesty. Because yes, there are certain things that are old-fashioned, but to me that they're also the things that are eternal. And I think in some ways literature does that, which is, in the end you read a story and you think, my goodness, this person is just really longing for meaning, you know?
Mm-hmm. These four women are Black American, Black Africans. They are going to America. This path that you made. Can you make? What did you try to with these four women so different that all have this in common? They left Africa, going to America, and trying to find a new world and seeking for that dream in the country of dream.
Yeah, it used to be the country of dream.
That metaphor.
We can talk about that.
Yes.
But I think they're very different. I mean, you're right that they all leave, but they leave under under different circumstances. And really, honestly, the person whose sort of American trajectory I find most interesting is Omelogo. Mm-hmm. Because Chia loves America. Chia finds America a refuge. Chia feels that in America she can be strange. And I understand that. I remember when I wanted to leave Nigeria, I think for a Nigerian often it's either the UK or it's the US. And the UK for me was not an option because it felt too close. Mm. I needed distance, and I felt that in America I could be strange. And that would not be strange, mm-hmm. Right? That it would not be strange to be strange. I think Chia is like that. But Omelogo leaves Nigeria and goes to America because she's looking for something better. And she doesn't find it. So and then she goes back to Nigeria, and then she hates America. I find that so much more interesting.
That ambiguity. You felt that also?
No.
No.
Well, there is a problem about being allowed back into the US when you leave. So maybe I shouldn't say what I feel about America until I get back to America.
So you wrote this book in the Biden, almost, I don't know the growth of the book, in the Biden administration. The book came out while Trump was in the second time in Washington. Can you tell us how things are going in a perspective of? I know that you are a storyteller. You can tell us a story about that. But you are talking about this book and making this tourney with the book now with this Trump administration. And I guess, as a public figure that you are being asked, how is America today, and how does it feel to be a feminist, a Black woman, a public figure, a writer that has these causes? How's that?
I don't know. Really, honestly, I think it's the most honest answer. There's still, and you think about how short this administration's time has been. It's barely 100 days. And I feel that so much has happened in that time. And I think that there is still a sense of disbelief, and sometimes even for some people, they've become numb. I remember when, after the inauguration, sort of the first 2 weeks, and all I kept thinking and saying was, wait, he can do that? Right? Because so one of the things I've done now is I'm reading American civics. Mm-hmm. I want to understand how the government is supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And of course, not having been educated, high school in the US, I realized I did not quite know the things I assumed was how the US should be. In fact, it is how the US should be. It's this government that's the anomaly. But I'm still I find myself now reading, well, Congress, in fact, is supposed to be the most independent arm of government. You wouldn't know it now, right? Because everybody's bowing and kissing body parts of a particular person. But
Let's go back to the book now,
Okay.
just for a while. Just for a while, and then we go back. We are talking about 4 women. They're called...
no, Isabel, I haven't answered your question.
Okay.
But at least you should be happy. I didn't name the body part that people are kissing. I think America is just very strange, and for me, there's a great sadness there, really, and it's not about what's happening; it's that it's happening in America, right? Because I grew up in a dictatorship. I know what it's like.
Yeah.
I know what authoritarian governments are like, and America was always the place where this sort of thing was not supposed to happen. And I think it's part of the reason that there's still a kind of, I think on the opposition, the left, there is almost a lack of action. And it seems to me that this is because Americans have always felt that this sort of thing happens in other places.
Yeah.
And now that it's happening in the US, I have to say I feel a lot of disappointment, even though a bit of understanding as well for the reaction of the left. But I also think that there's a privileged section of the left, people I happen to know, and I suppose I should count myself in there, but in which we're having conversations about parallels between the US and Germany in the 1930s. And it feels to me almost as though there's an undertone of excitement in these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's maybe because the real consequences of this administration have not been felt by the privileged left.
Yeah.
So right now what's happening is you're kidnapping a woman from Turkey. You're humiliating and dehumanizing people from Venezuela, from Mexico, people who are not privileged. And so it feels that we can sit back at dinner parties and say, oh, is this like 1938 or 1935 Germany? And there's something about it that I just feel that it's disturbing,
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that we are, I don't know, the moment is from perplexity, the moment is for a kind of, it's not fear yet, I guess.
Yes. Even fear. I think that's a good question. And what do I think it should be instead? More complexity, more fear, but also more, it's not a game. More of the idea that you really do not want this, right? There really are consequences in which I don't think democracy will be destroyed. I'm too much of an optimist. But I think you can do real damage in a way that will affect everything. Mm-hmm. And so maybe more seriousness, I think, but also honestly more courage.
From
more
left?
Courage, yes. More courage.
Saying what, for instance?
Everything. So, and yes, I understand that America is a society in which money is the ultimate, sort of the central motif.
You say something that money can buy justice, or justice is made with money, with the story of
when I first went to the US, I was shocked at how justice was money. So people would say something like, this man was innocent and he was incarcerated for 45 years. Oh, but he got $1 million. And I'm thinking, yeah, but, so that whole idea in the US where money is justice, money is everything. And yes, money is important, but I do think that there are people who can afford to stand on principle and push back who are not doing it. And that's what I mean by courage. But also, and maybe, I think when you come from when you grow up in and I don't think this is just true for Nigerians, I think this is true for many other parts of the world, that America was what you looked up to for a long time. And it's not that you don't know that America is flawed. You know of America's problems, but you also know that there's something at the center of America that is aspirational, that is admirable. And I just feel that that thing is not being fought hard enough for. There's a quickness to, I don't know, I was kind of disappointed at how quickly people caved, you know? I just thought all of the Hollywood films that we've fed about, the principled one wins and people stand up for what's right, and people don't go, sort of pleading and, offering free legal services, and universities saying, okay, we'll do what you want, until you're asked to do the most impossible, and then suddenly you say no. I mean, I think it is fair to say that I lost a hero, and I'm heartbroken.
You lost a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm heartbroken. I think that's where all of this bitterness is coming from.
Now, let's back to the book. The book is also about being an American and being a stranger in America, and all of that in the voices of 4 women, Shamaka, Zikora, Kadiatu, and Omologor. You have said before, we've talked about silence, and especially here, I guess the silence is around women's inner lives. Is something you try to break, to enter in this kind of intimacy. What kinds of silences did Dream Count allow you to explore, or you want to explore with this book?
I love that question. What do you think?
I don't know, I'm just a reader.
I learn about my books from my readers, from the thoughtful readers, not all readers. I think I think so much so that I think about women's bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt that, it seems to me very strange in a way, well, maybe not, but we should see more of the theme of motherhood in literature, and we don't. And I think when women write about motherhood, it's very easy to categorize their work as somehow not quite literature, sort of more women's fiction or entertainment or something. And, we all came from a woman, and it just seems to me strange that there's a lot of silence and shame across cultures when it comes to women's bodies. Culture, religion, there's just so much. And that often women's bodies are where, society's it feels to me that often all of the taboos and all of the issues that a society has, often we find that the woman's body almost becomes the crucible for them. So you have religions in which, if you have a period, you're not supposed to participate, and all of the restrictions, reproductive rights are often couched in the language of religion. So I think that silence about women's bodies is one that I have, and I continue to long for, a shattering of that silence. Because I think it's good for everyone. I think the better we know about women's bodies, not just women, but men. And maybe it might also reduce the entitlement that men have to women's bodies when they realize it belongs to women, right? But also I think there's a kind of, I just think that fiction should be brutally honest. And
what do you mean with brutally honest?
I think that sometimes we say things to ourselves that we want to be true, but they're not true. And I think, and I'm just so, I think maybe this is the reason that I object to being called a feminist writer rather than a writer who is a feminist. Because I think being a feminist...
You see yourself as a writer
who is a feminist? Yeah. I don't see myself as a feminist writer.
And when they call you that, people call you a lot a feminist writer.
Yeah. And I'm always sort of cringing, and when I can, I like, no, don't say that. And but I'm always very eager to explain what my position is, because I'm not running away from either label. But I think that when they're put together like that, there's an expectation
of representing someone?
Yes, and representing it in a way that is ideologically pure. And I don't think that's what fiction should do. So I think, for example, that in my fiction, when I say honest, I mean that it's important to acknowledge that there are certain things I wish the world was a certain way, but my fiction must recognize that it's not. I want a world in which all women are fulfilled and want the right things for themselves. But the world is not like that. And so I think it's important to speak honestly about how women who are brilliant, thoughtful, interesting, they get into relationships with men who you can tell just from meeting them are just really unhealthy for these women. But the women find ways to justify these things to themselves. Right? And I think it's the sort of thing that if you're doing a rah-rah feminism, you're not supposed to acknowledge. You're supposed to say that all women are strong, but that is not the reality. And also all of the ways in which female socialization has led to a kind of self-sabotage. So I'm interested in all of as a writer. As a feminist, it's different.
And when they call you, or people call you, an activist in some ways, in the Blackwood, with female questions, with gender questions, what is your reaction? Because you consider yourself mostly a writer.
Yes. I don't like that word, activist, but also I think partly because I don't think I've earned it, and I say that as a Nigerian who grew up. There's a man called Ken Saro-Wiwa who was an activist. And he was speaking up about southern Nigeria and oil and all of the devastation that had happened there, and the military government murdered him. I just feel that having a kind of tradition of what I consider real activists, when I'm called that, I just think, I just talk.
You just talk, but do you think your essays, because you've written lots of essays, public interventions, help you to find the literary writer, or to write novels? No.
I think they're two very different people. And you're right. I mean, yes, activism in the sense that I want to persuade, I want to change minds, I want to. Yes, so yes, there's a part of me that I want change. Right? The things that I feel so strongly about that I want to talk about, and the goal of doing that is I'm hoping that I can change a few minds. But that's so different from the person who writes fiction. They're two different people, really. They're two very different people.
They don't get together when you write novels. They are not. No.
The writer finds the essayist a little bit annoying. And then the essayist thinks that the writer is a little precious.
Okay.
So, when they get together, it doesn't go well. But
so let's get back to this for women. You find a way that is a structure. It's a polyphonic. You can say a polyphonic novel. How did you get to this structure? All these women have their voices. We are knowing each other from different perspectives. How did you get to this form?
Actually, the book that's how I wrote it. I wrote it in. I think when I started, I wasn't sure if I was going to have 3 or 4 women. And there's a lot about the choices I make that a lot of the choices are not fully conscious, right? So I guess it just came like that. But I will tell you the changes I made, which were conscious, which was that initially I had all of them in the first person.
Mhm.
And when I was editing, I thought, this is going to be confusing to the reader because you're going to see so many eyes, and at some point you're going to think, wait, who's that? So I thought I would do this, sort of make it, have some two of them be in the third person. But I did also just want to have this kind of multiplicity of voices, but also to see the characters from the points of view of other characters. I've always found it interesting how we're different people based on who knows us,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Which is why when women, I think that when women, there's so many cases in which women have reported being sexually assaulted by a man, and someone says, but he's so lovely. And it's possible that he's lovely to you, but he wasn't lovely to her.
Mhm.
And so this kind of seeing people from different sides.
You say something in the end of the book, in that text, where you explain some choices and the circumstances while you wrote it. You say something that is a victim. It's not a perfect. It's not. There is no perfection in a victim, and you do this. Try to let us know that it's why you underline this idea.
I think for a number of reasons. I think increasingly we live in this sort of contemporary world is one in which people think that somehow victimhood is a virtue. And it's not. Right? You don't become a virtuous person because you're a victim of something. You can be a really horrible person and be a victim of something. And on the other hand, I don't think that a victim has to be perfect to get justice. Right? Which again, I think is something that's it's in particular something that's very salient for women, because in so many cases of sexual assault, and of course, like the one in the novel, a woman is expected to be absolutely perfect before she can even get any sympathy at all. So the reason that idea is important to me for sort of this two, victimhood is not a virtue. So some people, and I think this is true increasingly of sort of the social media world, and also and it's something that I think is encouraged among younger people, and I say this as an old woman of 47, where younger people, where victimhood becomes, it's sort of like you're wearing a hat, a virtuous hat, and you want the world to see it that way, but that's actually not true. Not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm. You use some irony in many moments. I'm thinking about we talk about she here, Omelagor. She writes a blog with lots of irony, giving advices to men about women body and how they should act with women. Why did you do that? I guess you must have lots of fun doing this.
That's why. I just did it to have fun. I'd write something and I would stop and laugh. But also, I think that humor, one of the loveliest things somebody has said to me about this novel is he said to me, it's very rare to be able to do melancholy and humor in a book. Mm-hmm. And it meant so much to me. I think melancholy I've always been drawn to. I think humor is really maybe the most universal language, and it's how we can get into more serious things. Right? If we can laugh about something, then maybe the possibility of talking about it becomes more likely. And I grew up in a family of laughter. So laughter.
I saw you laughter with your brother.
Yes. My brother has a very foolish sense of humor. Actually, everyone, I was just thinking, all of my siblings. So growing up was just full of foolishness, laughter. And so humor comes easily to me. But I also think it can be, in some ways, it can be a literary device to talk about things that otherwise might be too heavy or might not quite work in literature, because then you might sound as though you're hitting your reader over the head.
Yes.
So this it's called Dear Men.
Yeah.
So she says, she's always like, dear men, remember I'm on your side. And then she's giving men tips for, here's how you apologize to your girlfriend, that kind of thing. And
So you don't demonize men here.
no, we're on their side.
Giving them advice.
Yes, because in the end, it's, you share the world, whether or not you like it, so you have to figure out how to.
Yeah, and while we are saying the silence, you mentioned the silence of related to the women body, and here we have women bodies in Africa, but also in America. There are some contrasts here and some ambiguities. You meant to explore these different views of a body, a woman body, in different continents. How do you want to do that? What was her idea?
I think that there are many things that are universal in how, when I travel to different parts of the world, I'm always very curious about women's experiences and talking to women. And there's so much that I think is universal, but there's also so much that is different. So the fundamental thing is there, which is, society and women's bodies, but the judgments are different. In the West, I would say in the US and in Europe, I feel that often it's considered universal, this idea that women become invisible as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
But Nigeria and much of Africa, because it's still not a youth-obsessed culture, that's really not the case. There's a certain respect a woman gets as she gets older. I mean, I often joke about how I cannot wait to be a cantankerous 70-year-old, because that's when I'll finally get the respect I deserve. No, but really, you keep looking young. So there's so many women in Nigeria who will tell you stories about how they have been disrespected, especially when they look young. So a woman who's accomplished, brilliant, has a good job, her driver is very rude to her because he's thinking, you look so young, I could be your father.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But with age, there's a certain respect comes, and I think also the way that women are so just horribly objectified, women's bodies, the kind of just horrible judgments, I don't think it's quite as bad in Nigeria as it is in the US. In the US, this obsession with weight and, young people being so unhappy and depressed and anxious, everybody trying to lose weight. And Nigeria isn't quite like that. And sometimes I find it quite lovely to see the broad range of what's considered beautiful in Nigeria. So women who in the US, people would say, oh, she's fat. In Nigeria, a lot of people would say, my gosh, she's so fine. So I find that just slightly healthier for women, this idea, because it is true. I mean, the reality is that beauty has a wide range.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that sometimes the voices that we hear the most in Western cultures are the voices that, tell us things that are not necessarily, I guess, healthy. But while I say that, I should also step back and say that in the novel, there is somebody who, it's a minor character, so we can talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody who dies after having a BBL surgery, and that's in Nigeria. So, it's not paradise. I think for me, writing about that and my interest in that is more about young women and the kind of pressures young women face, and how, I just personally find it heartbreaking that the world is full of young women who do not know how beautiful they are, because the world just doesn't tell them, and instead tells them the opposite. So I was reading about the very high rates of anxiety and depression among young women in particular who consume a lot of social media, and how they're interested in things like plastic surgery, and they're 16.
Do you think there is a regression in that kind of...
Yes. Yes. I would argue that in 1970, in general, young women knew or knew a bit more how beautiful they were. Or maybe, I mean, I think that there are always anxieties and insecurities that come when you're young, but I think social media exploits it to just the most horrible degree. And, so you have, actually there's a line of dialogue in the novel that really did happen, where I'm talking to young people in Nigeria about the surgery, because maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was very popular in Nigeria, where people would go get this, this enlargement of their behinds. And sometimes you'd see them and you think, but who told you this was a good idea? But anyway. And then,
And what happened to that sentence in the end of the book when you appeal to that kind of solidarity, female solidarity? We are more than men, so.
yes, right, and we should make the rules. No, really, we should. I mean, who knows? It might be a better world. We don't know, but we haven't tried. If women were in charge, we don't know if it'll be better, but we haven't tried. But no, so I remember having this conversation with these young women, and I was just so taken aback by how they were horrified that the person who had done the surgery was not qualified. They were not horrified that a young, beautiful woman wanted to get the surgery. So that really bothered me. I thought it doesn't even occur to them to question that this is terrible, right? And it just broke my heart.
And that chapter with Kadiatu, it's one of the hardest chapters here in the book. You mention that tradition in Nigeria, but also you write about an assault in US, and you describe all of the exposition that we have to pass with, and all the taboos that you have to deal with something like that. What was your concern while we were writing this kind of so difficult and delicate themes? What was, as a writer?
I don't know. I wanted to write about women's lives, and I don't think it's possible to write about women's lives without writing about sexual assault in all of its different forms, whether it's when you're a teenager and you get on a bus outside London and there's a grown man exposing himself to you, or you're a child growing up in India and your mother says you cannot go outside without a grown-up, but your brothers can go outside. I just think, and then of course, just sort of the more recognizable versions of sexual assault. I just think it's important to, and I think especially in literature, because we can read the news and hear about what happened, but I think when we see it in literature, there's more texture, there's more complexity, and hopefully I think we hear it more, we hear it better. Also, I think, as a reader, I know that when I've read fiction about things, it's just different. I absorb it, I inhabit it, and I think that's important.
You create this character. She's a maid in America, and while you were writing this book, you lost your parents, and you find that Kadiatu is the name of this woman. It's you compare or you talk about her as an homage to your mother. Why?
I don't think she's really so much that as that I think my mother would sympathize with her.
Why?
My mother was nothing like her, right? So
you say that in the end in the text also.
Yes, but it's a kind of, a kind of mutuality. And I think often that is also what binds women who like women. And I think it's important to say that because not all women like women. So those women who like women, there's almost an immediate bond of mutuality when you hear the experiences of another woman, and it doesn't matter where she comes from, what she looks like. I knew that my mother was very alert to women. My mother would never have called herself a feminist. But my mother, and actually after she died, we heard so many stories of women she had helped and we did not even know about it. And one particular woman said my mother gave her a job and actually said to her, I'm giving you this job because you're a woman. And then the next thing she said was, and make sure you do not shame me. And so this woman said that throughout, and she said that even now, whenever she's working and she wants to sort of do something a bit not as well, my mother's voice is in her head, do not shame me. So my mother was very feminist without calling herself a feminist. And I think she would have felt sympathy for Kajetu. You know, a woman who is not powerful, right? Who, you're not formally educated. You're in a world where people are speaking a language that's not yours. And suddenly you've accused a very powerful man. And you're suddenly thrust into this space that is so alien to you. It's very difficult to thrive in that kind of space when it's not yours, you know. I think my mother would have sympathized with her. And so for me, there was just something very beautiful. I think my mother would have liked this book. Well, if she read it, because she didn't read all my books. My mother did not read all my books, but she told everyone how wonderful they were. It's true. It's true. My father read everything I wrote. My mother, not so much. But after Half of a Yellow Sun came out, everywhere she went, she had it in her handbag. And the reason I think she would have liked this one in particular is because it sees women very clearly, I think. And it's also my first novel that I just feel is deeply absorbed by the idea of women. And I think my other novels have not been in this way. And I do think you're right.
What has changed in the way that you look at women between the first novel and this? Because women are central in every novels that you wrote.
Yes, but not in the way that they are here.
Yeah.
What has changed? I think I've changed. I think that losing my parents changed me drastically. But I don't know. It's difficult to answer. I think I'm more. But it's a word you use that I really like, introspective. I think I'm more willing to be introspective. I think I am more uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
I think grief can do that to you. Grief, at least for me, losing both my parents, and I adored them. And my entire life, my self-identification was James and Grace Adichie's daughter. So when that was suddenly just snatched away, in the most unexpected, just horrible way, everything shook. Suddenly everything shook. And I really started writing after my mother died. So I think a certain kind of uncertainty, you don't have a choice but to be aware of uncertainty. And you find yourself looking inward. I'm so much more aware of mortality. I'm always thinking about death. It's terrible. And, I'm getting on a plane yesterday and I'm thinking, well, if I die, what's going to happen to my children? And I'm thinking, I hope that bloody man doesn't marry someone else and raise my kids in a way that I don't want. But anyway, please don't put that on social media, please. And so I came to this book with a kind of, you know what it is? It's been less sure. I'm less sure.
Less sure.
Of everything.
Mm-hmm.
My father died in June of 2020. He was just mildly unwell. We'd been cracking jokes 2 days before on the phone. And then after he died, first of all, I fell apart, but also I became so frightened that I was going to lose someone else that I loved. And apparently this is also part of grieving. And I spoke to a grief therapist, and I remember she said to me, I want us to look at this statistically. What are the odds, really, Chimamanda? And I thought about it, and I said to her, you're right. I mean, really, I lost my dad. Of course, I'm really not going to lose another loved one so soon. And then my mother died. So that, for me, first of all, my father was a professor of statistics, but now statistics, I'm just like, forget it. But also, it's that anything can happen. And so suddenly, you're just less sure. But I think it can be a good thing in some ways. I think it was for me writing this book. I felt much more vulnerable. But also I felt that I didn't have to prove how strong I am.
You don't?
I don't. I don't even have to. I am strong. But I think that inside of strength, I think that there is room for uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. You wrote this book after a big success, Americanah, that gave you lots of, readers and the name that is recognized everywhere in literary world. There was a kind of that block that you mentioned. Has something to do with that? No, nothing?
No, not at all, because I don't really think about... I know I'm successful. I'm very grateful for it. But and I say this, I don't mean to sound false, but I don't really actively remember it when I'm writing. I don't, and I think because I've never written toward a certain expectation, I'm still fortunate enough I follow, it's my own drum. Right? When I wrote Americanah, I did not think it would do well. I thought Americans will hate this book. Actually, the only book I thought should do well is the book that did not do well. The Thing Around Your Neck. I feel like nobody bought the bloody book. And I thought this is a really good collection of stories. I thought this should appeal to everyone. Nothing really is offensive here. And so because of that, and Half of a Yellow Sun, which, it's a novel about the Nigerian Biafran War, and even when I was writing it, people were saying to me, you must be crazy. Why are you writing about something that's so controversial? But my heart, that's where my heart was. And I think because I've always had that attitude, I don't really... of course I hope the books will do well, but I never write to that. And so when I was at home all those years, sitting in front of my laptop and just being blank, I did not remember that Americanah was successful. All I had was just this panic that I will never write fiction again.
But you did, and we are here talking about this. And in this book, you talk about storytelling, the importance of storytelling, and also the storytelling. And these women are kind of testimonies and testament. They mean a testament also. What do you mean by this? They transport kind of...
Tell me more, Isabel. I really find this interesting.
No, you wrote it. You wrote it. It's in the end.
So you tell me what you make of it. Women as testimony and testament. I don't know what I meant. I think I just like the sound of the words. So I thought I was very clever.
It sounds well. It sounds great.
You're a writer, so honestly, that happens sometimes when you sort of it's happening and you're feeling wow.
The sound, yeah.
Yes, you're like, I'm so good.
That's the kind of high that you are mentioning.
That's part of the high. That's part of the high. And afterwards, when your editor says, that really doesn't work, you're thinking, come on, of course it works.
It sounds so well.
Yes. No, but I think I meant, but I did mean it as. Well, I think I wrote that in particular about Kajiatu, no? Yes.
Yes.
I think it's the idea of being so wounded by something that happened in real life, and then trying to imaginatively tell the story in your own way. But by doing that, you're in fact trying to give dignity to the real story, if that makes sense. So this character who is inspired by a real person is obviously not the real person, but I was propelled to write her because I was so wounded by what had happened to the real person. And I felt that sometimes with literature we can try to return dignity. In the way that so many parts of the world that had their stories written for them, and suddenly they're writing their own stories, and there's a sense in which it's dignity, that you're taking your dignity back.
I was asking you exactly about that. What do you think it's the role of literature today, and novel in particular? What do you think?
I'm always reluctant to talk about the role of novels. I think the role of novels is just to be novels, because I think that, and as a reader, there's so many novels. I love novels that are not explicitly political, really.
Such as?
Even though I think all novels are political.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
But what I mean is, okay, let's
openly
say,
political.
yes. And also the sort of novel where there is no engagement with sort of reality, where sometimes you're thinking, have they paid their rent? Because there's nothing about that in the novel. Or sometimes you're thinking, wait, how do you even earn a living? Because you're spending your time. So, there's novels where someone's walking around the city, and you're thinking, yeah, but how do you buy your food, right?
Yeah.
Those novels, I think, work, but I think what I would say is that if a novel chooses to be politically engaged, then it does have a duty to do it well. By which I mean it cannot be propaganda. It has to be complex. It has to be able to see multiple points of view. So, if somebody wanted to write an angry novel about Trump supporters, it would be terrible if all of them were racist. Because it would be a bad novel.
Yeah. And can you give us some examples of novels, good novels that you read recently that has that qualities that you mentioned?
See, every time I'm asked the question, I just go blank.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
And then I'm going to go back to my hotel room and think, oh my God, I should have talked about. Oh, I do know a novel that did it well, and it's by a woman whose family is Palestinian, and it's called, I think her name is Allah. And I forget. I never remember what the novels are called, but it's so it starts sort of back maybe in the 60s. Does anybody know who I'm talking about? I think her name is Alaa. No? Okay.
Allah?
Yes, I think that's her first name. See, I told you I'm blanking.
Okay.
But it's sort of this sprawling, the family starts in Palestine, they have to leave. I think they go to Oman or somewhere in the Gulf, and then at some point they sort of this forced diaspora of a family. And it's very moving, and it's a kind of thing that I think can be very helpful in reading the news today, to see the human and also the historical context of Palestine. But yeah, I'm blank. I did just talk about in a podcast the novel Anil's Ghost by Michael Ondaatje, and it's set sort of during aftermath-ish of the war in Sri Lanka. And I found it very beautiful. I read it many years ago, but there's a feeling you have when you read a novel that is powerful, and it stayed with me. So I love that. I love many more. Whenever I'm asked questions like this, I'm reluctant because somebody will hear that I talked about a novel on stage and send me an angry text saying, why didn't you talk about my novel? I have many writer friends.
Yeah, of course. You are Nigerian, but you are in America also. Why did you decide to be in America so recently? You are so angry about America.
Well, in some ways I'm happy I finally became an American citizen, because otherwise I'd be worried about being allowed back in.
Yeah.
I mean, even an American citizenship doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll be allowed back in now. But for many years, when I went to the U.S., I went as a student, and then I went back to Nigeria, then I went back to the U.S. as a fellow, and then at some point I got a green card as an immigrant of extraordinary ability, which I was rather pleased with, because other people were getting it from their jobs, and I was just like, oh, I got mine as an immigrant of extraordinary ability. But and apparently that's how Melania Trump got hers. But anyway, all right, we're not doing gossip here. Did you hear though? Did you know? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I did not want to become an American citizen. And it was a choice I made because I felt that to tell Nigerian stories honestly and authentically, that I needed to go through the humiliations of having a Nigerian passport, and there are many.
Such as?
Is there a Nigerian here? Yes. He's like yes. It doesn't matter. It's having a Nigerian passport makes you become part of. There's a lovely line I like from Graham Greene's novel, where the Englishman is looking at the Africans whose land he has invaded, and he says they were like a vague black blur. So there was no making a distinction. It was just a vague black blur. When you have a Nigerian passport, it's like you become a vague black blur. It doesn't matter what your individual circumstance is. You're immediately assumed to be fraudulent in some way. So you go through, you have to jump through all kinds of hoops to get visas that for other people would be ordinary and normal. And when you do get the visa and you land in the country where you're going to, you're very likely to be subjected to more questions, step aside. And I say this as somebody who's relatively privileged. When I had become a well-known writer, I still had to deal with a lot of crap. And so often I would wonder, what is it like for other people who don't have the privilege of telling the immigration person, I'm a writer? Sometimes they'll say, you're sure? And then sometimes they have in fact Googled me and then said, oh, I see you're really a writer. And it's just awful. And it really, I think speak to, Nigerians who are honest, who have legitimate business, they have such a hard time. I recently was in line behind one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria, in Germany, and he was going through immigration, so I was kind of right behind him. It was a flight from Lagos to Frankfurt, right? And apparently he'd been invited by Mercedes-Benz in Germany to do something. And I remember standing behind him, and he was getting so irritated with the immigration officer. And so I heard him saying, why are you asking me why I'm here? It is your people that invited me. and I remember thinking, just flip through his passport and you can see that he has traveled extensively. But it doesn't matter. It's the passport. You're the vague black blur. Mm-hmm. So I was the vague black blur for many, many years. And then a year and a half ago, I was exhausted. And also because my family members had been saying to me, this is becoming ridiculous. They're like, you've made your point. Mm-hmm. We understand that you're principled. Can you now, please? Because often we would be traveling as a family, my husband, my kid, and it would be fine for them, and my passport would be stuck. And once we couldn't go to, I forget where we're supposed to go because the Nigerian passport required extra processing time, but we were one family, applying with one bank statement, the same hotel, everything, but that Nigerian passport. So at some point I gave in and I applied for citizenship.
No, you are a Nigerian American?
No? I'm a Nigerian. I'm a Nigerian who spent time in America, used to love America, and remains grateful to America. That's how I like to self-define now.
I have many questions here, much more questions, but I guess we have to open to the audience. Please ask questions to Chimamanda.
Hello. That was so wonderful, and we're so excited to have you here. My question is, I'd love to know your relationship with the news and where you get your news from and how often you read it or how do you avoid it. Yeah, practical question.
Do you mean right now in particular?
Yeah, I guess, tell me your relationship over the last year with the news cycle.
Tell me yours.
Do you know what, I was thinking about this as I was asking, and I guess I have the Guardian app on my phone, and I read articles that friends send me. So it's often they land in my WhatsApp, and then I will open them up. But yeah, that's...
I did change with the first few weeks of this administration, of the American administration. I used to wake up and read maybe 4 or 5 newspapers. Sort of scan and read the things that interested me. But at some point, I stopped, especially in the morning. So I'd rather read them in the evening and not as many. And it's partly because, well, first of all, the policies change. I mean, sometimes you read something in the morning. By evening, it's changed, right? So it's best you read it in the morning so you don't actually waste your time. It's best to read it in the evening. But it's also, I think, that I started to feel that there's so much coarseness. There's so much that I think leadership is so important because it sets the tone. And I think there's something that's happened to America where there's just, not even just America, everywhere. When I was reading, I could tell where you're from. And your prime minister has adopted a certain kind of language in the past few weeks that is just horrifying and so effing cowardly, right? You feel that you need to copy an unstable person in a more powerful country. And so suddenly your language has started to dehumanize immigrants, has started to use this sort of almost borrowing from Mr. Farage, UK first. So it's that coarsening of language and coarsening of ideas and everything just suddenly lacking. I don't want to say, lacking beauty and humanity and just, there's just values that I think are important. And so because of that, I think I have a responsibility to know what is happening in the world. But I'm still trying to figure out the balance between knowing, which I think is important, but also not becoming it. I want to have enough of a remove so that I never forget that this is abnormal. And so I will read. So I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. I read the Wall Street Journal much more now because I sort of feel like they have, I guess, they know what's going on more than, right? And I read the New York Times less, partly because also sometimes the language is so convoluted, at the end of it, you still don't know what the hell happened. I used to read the Washington Post. I stopped after the owner decided that it was going to become propaganda. In the UK, sometimes I'll read the Telegraph because I want to know. I'm very interested in what my enemies are thinking.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your talk. My name is Tamar, and I'm a junior at the Carlucci American International School of Lisbon. And I kind of wanted to ask you more of an analytical question about your book, Americanah. So, each of Ifemelu's romantic relationship, Obinzi, Kurt, and Blaine, seem to reflect a different stage in her identity journey. Did you intentionally structure these relationships as a way of braiding together different parts of her self-discovery? Because in your book, there's a very recurring motif of 3. So Ifemelu had 3 boyfriends. She grew up in Nigeria, then she moved to the United States, then she went back to Nigeria. And then a major part of the book takes place at the salon where she gets her hair braided. And also, her hair is by itself a theme of her identity journey. She relaxes her hair, she braids her hair, she cuts her hair, she lets it be natural. So I was wondering what your opinion was.
I think your teacher should give you an A. I'm serious. I can see I can see a very good essay, something like 3 as metaphor in Adichie's Americanah. I never liked those essays in literature class, by the way, but I think it's a fair reading of it. I mean, it wasn't intentional, so I think, and this is why I think that the creative thing is quite different from the sort of more critical. So I think when I'm thinking, so it's interesting. I'm only just realizing that you're right. She did have 3 boyfriends I did not know that. But I think it's an interesting and fair reading of it, because I do think that she's a different person during each relationship, and I think each one in some ways shows her something about herself, and shows us, the reader, something about her in a way. Which of the boyfriends did you like best?
I liked Vinci best. I thought he was just the best, yeah.
What, you didn't like Blaine? What about poor Kurt?
I mean, Kurt, in the beginning, I thought it could progress to be something better, but very disappointing. I was very disappointed.
Thank you.
Hi, Chimamanda. First, I would like to make that remark. How you find sleep if you read the news in the evening? But before I come to my
Maybe
question.
that's why I haven't been sleeping.
Okay, so maybe time to change habits. Okay, so I was listening on one of your podcasts. You said the U.S. academia lost freedom of imagination, curiosity, compassion, and good faith. And instead, they are now engaged in self-righteousness. So my question is it ever going to get better? How do you feel? Are you on the optimistic side, or is it going to take another 50 years and we won't see in our lifetime? Certainly it will get better, maybe, I don't know.
This is why I don't like to think of this, because I'm terrified of what my conclusion will be. Do you know, honestly, I don't know. I'm generally optimistic, but I think what's happened to American academia, because it's also been politicized, I think that's part of the problem. So there are people who know in American academia that it has become authoritarian, that that they know what the problems are, but because they're constantly there's constantly the right to battle. They're always in battle mode. America is so polarized. And so I think because of that, they will never admit, even when they know that something is wrong, because admitting it means somehow giving a point to the right. And so I think, I don't know if it's going to change. I don't know if... I wish real curiosity would come back, where students could just be allowed to be curious and ask, and where ignorance is an opportunity. But it's not the case now, and honestly, I don't know that it will change anytime soon. If America had good leadership that tried to reduce the polarization, maybe it might trickle down, but I just don't know. I mean, now in America, if somebody on the right says the sky is blue, somebody on the left feels compelled to say, no, the sky is purple. And lost in all of this is the real color of the sky. So I want to be hopeful, but maybe that too.
Hello. I'm so nervous because my English, I don't feel so comfortable with my English, but you are my idol, so I need to ask you. I write something because you need to know about it. First, thank you for being here in Lisbon. There are many black women who would like to be here today and didn't have the opportunity. So I hope you come back to Lisbon and yes, and in the bigger room. So my question is, sorry, I'm so nervous. You must. My question is, how do you feel about giving voice and representing so many black women around the world?
So as I get older, I'm becoming really stupidly emotional, so I might start to cry. So I'm not going to look at you while I answer so that I don't start crying. But I love your lipstick. Thank you. It really, I think for me, the idea that what I do matters to women and to black women, it means everything to me. And when I'm talking of my experiences, I don't assume that I'm necessarily talking for everyone. Right? So when someone then finds their own story in my story, it makes me happy. It makes me. I like women. I'm a woman who likes women, and so yeah, it makes me happy. And I'm going to tell you, I'm coming back to Lisbon, and we're going to make sure that 95% of the audience is black women. I'm not even joking. And we'll spend half the time talking about hair. No, I'm joking about the hair parts. No, but I hear you, and I actually would like to talk a bit more afterwards. Yeah.
Hello, Ms. Chimamanda. Thank you so much for being here. I have been an admirer of your writing since day one. However, I was so shocked to read the back of this book and it said you were a travel writer. Where? No, not me. No, it's the character, not me. Okay, I was like, since when?
Wait, you mean you missed all my travel writing books?
I was like, did she publish something I don't know about?
No, but
well,
I think...
the children's books I didn't know about, but yes. I was so... Okay, then I feel a lot better. And yes, please come back to Lisbon. We did a lot to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Emily Austin, and I also go to the Carlucci American International School of Lisbon. I'm a senior at the high school. I wanted to ask a lot about in your book Americanah, and I also studied it. I wrote a college essay on it, so this is a really big opportunity for me. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask a lot in Ifemeli's blogs. You talk about the tensions between African Americans, Black Africans who are not American, as well as just Black Americans like myself. I'm Guyanese, and so Caribbean, a different culture that's a lot of opposing to the African American culture and just Africans who come to the United States. I wanted to ask, how has that been a reflection of your own personal experiences coming to the United States, and what are your views on those sort of differences between those three major Black groups in the United States?
So, and I also write about it in this novel. So my experience is much milder than what I write about. So often fiction writers write about the lives they wish they lived, not the ones they actually live. So, but when I came to the US, I did not know African American history. I did not know, you kind of, I guess I had seen Roots, but there's a kind of, you just really don't know. And I remember just being a bit confused, and I remember once in class where somebody had said something about watermelons and Black people, and a few of it was a class in which there were maybe 4 black people, and they got very upset, and I was confused. Because I thought, what's wrong with watermelons? I like watermelons. But it was coming from a place of ignorance. I did not understand. For example, that watermelon had become a thing that was used to dehumanize African Americans. And so actually went through a period of intentionally reading African American history to understand it. And part of the reason I did that is I felt that I was starting to absorb the single story of African Americans. And it's another thing that happened was someone had said, oh, the reason African Americans in this country live in inner cities is because they're lazy. And actually the person who said that was an African. And a part of me thought, yeah, that's why. But even then a part of me thought, really? And so I started to read. I really made the choice to. And so now I feel that I'm in a position to talk, with authority about why inner cities are as they are, about redlining, about all of the ways in which the American state set out specifically to oppress a group of people because they were black, right? I mean, not because they were poor, not because they were, because they were black. And I also think that there's a lot of, that when Africans come to the US, Caribbeans come to the US, often they come without knowing this history. And I also think that African Americans have grown up in a world that is not only racist toward them, but also has made them believe that to have come from Africa is something shameful. So I have African American friends who've talked about when they were in the playground, so people about my age who were born in the late 70s, in the playground being called African, and that was an insult. Right? And so my feeling is that there's a mutual misunderstanding. And in my utopia, I think of us as siblings because we are siblings, right? Because in the end, all of us, there's a common descent. We're Africans. I think of Caribbeans as Africans who live in the Caribbean. No, but really just to say that my Pan-Africanism it's a kind of more emotional Pan-Africanism where I'm very interested in the destinies of black peoples all over the world. This is the reason I love Brazil, for example, being in Portugal, and the black peoples and their stories there, and so anyway, I guess to your question, my experience has been one which I consider one of learning, but also one in which my African American friends and I are very honest. We have real conversations. And we disagree. So I have a dear friend, who's still a dear friend, and we disagree on the subject of slavery because she thinks Africans in general have to take responsibility for it. And I think that slavery was a shared pain because the people who were taken away were also loved by their African families. And that I think that we should have a more, in the black community, we should have a more nuanced view of slavery. And remember always that the question is who benefited? I mean, really in the end, right? But anyway, that's another long thing. Read Dream Count, there's a part, there's a bit there about it, but I do think that it's important for us to acknowledge the ways in which we're different, right? America does this thing where it just makes, again, it's that vague black blur, right? Everyone is black and there's no distinctions. And I find that actually to be quite racist because there are distinctions, right? Actually, the cultural distinctions between African Americans who are in the Northeast and African Americans who are in the South. I mean, they're actually quite dramatic cultural distinctions. So anyway, yes, that's. I think we're siblings and we should disagree when we want to, but we still love each other.
Thank you.
Chimamanda, thank you so much for being here. I wrote my question down to make sure I don't mess it up. But my name is Jael. I am an American, actually, raised in a Caribbean household. And I'm a songwriter turned fiction writer, but writing is very amazing outlet for creativity for me. And so I understand that when we're doing this form of creative writing and fiction, it's like you go along with the characters. You kind of don't know where they're going. You're both on the ride together. So I wanted to ask you, as a strong and very vocal woman of color, there are many lives women we live. We like reincarnate over and over throughout our life and reinvent ourselves, become a different beast, if you will, at each turn of event in our lives. And so I would ask you, what advice would you give for women navigating their way out of writer's block in this creative field?
Sorry, my sister, are you in it right now? Chocolate? No, but honestly, I don't even feel that I'm equipped to, because all I did was just wait it out. And I wish I could tell you that I was optimistic or brave. I wasn't. I was always scared and actually often quite depressed because I wasn't writing. And everything around me was kind of going okay, right? I mean, but I was depressed, and it was because I wasn't writing fiction. And sometimes I tried to shield it or hide it, but it was there. And I don't know, I would say I try to read things I love. Sometimes it helps because reading what you love. Sometimes it doesn't help because you're thinking, how the hell did that person write that anyway? And it also did not help. I know I'm not helping, just being honest. It did not help when dear friends of mine finished their novels. I was like, what the hell? How did you do that? And at some point I would hold my own novel and think, I wrote this? Right? Because and this was when I was sort of in my more, sort of my darker phases. But I would say, if you can, just keep reminding yourself that it will pass. That's the only thing I can say, right? And again, it's easy to say, I know, but be kind to yourself. I think that it's creative people who often are the most vicious to themselves. I know from experience. Good luck.
I guess we have to finish. They are giving me signs. So thank you so much. Chimamanda will be happy to.
I have a question.
Oh,
Sorry.
It's the last one, I guess. Sorry.
I don't know. So first of all, thank you. It's the second time I have the chance to listen to you, and I'm always blown and happy. And I was resonating your words when you said, I don't like when people said I'm a feminist writer, because I do consider myself a writer who is a feminist. And I used to identify myself as a feminist, as an activist, as an anti-racist, but then all these spaces I have been, I couldn't identify a connection between the practice and the ideas behind those words. And I've been thinking and asking myself if we could blame the words of the use that we do of them. Besides that, and considering the chances, there's gender, race, classes, although we forget about class too many times. We had kind of what I consider hyper visibility, but not real changes. And what we are seeing now is a very worrying increase of racism, of misogyny, all things that we have been fighting. So we were talking about having a room with 95% of women. But I've been asking myself, as feminist, as activist, if we have failed something. and where and what we have failed. And in the Western world, too many black women have interiorized this whole speech of, it's not my responsibility to educate black men. Who is this responsibility? What feminism is about? And can we keep men out of this discussion? And when we think we are involving men, are we really doing this dialogue, or we are fighting against men and keeping them outside of this whole conversation? So please, not a 95% of women, please.
Bravo.
What do you think? I don't have an answer if we have failed something or not, but I would love to.
I want, thank you. Thank you. I find your question so interesting. Really. Thank you. When you were talking, I was thinking I'd like to be her friend. But I want to answer the 95% part first, which is, I said that it was half a joke, but not really. And in some ways, it's a response to what has become apparent to me, which is, I am a black woman coming to do an event here. And it seems to me that communities of black women were not necessarily reached out to. And so it hasn't been said overtly, but that's the undertone. And I say this because I get this quite a lot. I go to different places in Europe, and afterwards there are tons of messages that my manager gets saying, nobody told us she was coming. And it's always from black women's groups. And so for me this is, and again, it's not to say that this space has deliberately decided to exclude black women. I think that the way that, I don't want to call it racism, but the way that exclusion can sometimes happen is that people just forget that you're there, right? It doesn't occur to them to reach out to communities of black women. So that my 95% point was about that. And so sometimes when I've done things in different parts of the world, I have actually had the organizers, I've had people, I've said questions saying, have you reached out to black communities, right? Because often the black communities are there and they're interested, but sometimes nobody reaches out to them. The other thing about, have we failed? Yes, we have failed. We failed woefully, I know. But I was curious about what you said about, because I would like an example of what you said about I know we don't have time, but you said it's sort of the difference between the theory and the practice. So in a case like anti-racism or anti-racist, and I'm sorry, I have to say it's an expression I've never used myself, and I wouldn't use to describe myself. Because of course the idea of it is one I'm 100% for. But the rhetoric is uninteresting to me because I think it's very performative. I think there's so much about the talk of, is that me? No. There's so much about, yeah, anyway, so it's a language, I don't use it to describe myself. I just would never say I'm anti-racist. I think it just comes from a particular kind of space that I don't feel comfortable with because I find a lot of it to be shallow and performative. And, the people who fought for civil rights for African Americans didn't use that kind of language, but they actually got things done. But in terms of feminism, I think that we need men. I've always felt and said that while feminism is about women, but men have to be part of it. I think every justice movement has had people who do not belong to the group that are excluded, right, be part of it. And that there's a sense in which, but increasingly I think that what we need men for is to raise boys. We need men to raise boys right. I don't think, increasingly people talk about, mothers, you have to watch how you raise your sons. I think fathers. That's really, I think, if men did that, I think we might be good. But the other thing, your question was so multifaceted. But I want to. There's the last part of it, which was. He said the men. Are we excluding them? Misogyny. We forget classism. This is true. I think classism is so important. We do forget it. Wait, what? There's something else.
I said that we talk about a lot, but nothing really changed.
Just give me a second, just to say, I can understand, we take it as last question to allow the session to be closed. So we have asked you a lot more than you were expecting to
I'm happy.
give us.
I've had fun, I'm not complaining. But I do want to answer the last part of her question.
So if you don't mind, it will be the last question. Also because we have some signatures from your side. If you are kind enough, and there is a lot of people, so we'll take one book per person and understand that it will be just a signature and not a personal thing, because there will be no time to do it unless we stay here until midnight, and we don't want you to force you to death.
Well, it's okay. Yes, thank you. I still do want, yeah. So what part did I miss? I feel like I missed a part of your question. I feel like I missed a part of the question.
No, the question was, what do you think about it? So if we fail, you answer already.
Yeah.
You answer already.
Okay,
Don't worry. Don't worry.
I had something else in my head.
Let's close the session. Thank you.